Hello, unforgettable vocalist. My name is O'Neil Gerald Donald, and you are listening to the Reclaim Your Voice podcast. This is the time to set the stage for your voice to be at its greatest potential. On the Reclaim Your Voice podcast, we help you to take your singing from unsure to unforgettable. We give you the tools that you need to stop losing your voice, break your bad singing habits, and find your unique sound. It's wonderful to be with you again today, and I wanted to talk to you guys about mimicking technique. I feel like I'm just going to really dive into this because especially as a vocal coach, I talk to a lot of people who give me lots of conclusions about what they should be doing with their voice, and a lot of the time I kind of nod my head and I kind of wait for them to finish so I can actually correct them into being where they need to be and allowing their voice to be where it needs to be in order for them to sound their best, and not just sound their best but feel their best, because singing is not just about sound. Singing is about feeling, physical feeling as well. And in order to create a great sound, you often need to go in the direction of good feeling. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about mimicking technique and a few of the problems that come with mimicking technique, because a lot of people think that technique is something that can pass by sound only, when in reality technique is actually something that happens as a result of becoming more aware of one's body. And a lot of people do that naturally. Like, there's people that naturally, use their voices in a way that blesses and blesses their body. And it's great for them. But there's a lot of you that are listening that are like, what, how on earth am I supposed to do this? And I'm letting you know that mimicking technique mimicking technique isn't necessarily just a bad thing, but it can easily be a bad thing if you're not listening to your body. And so I wanted to talk to you today about mimicking technique. So I have a few problems with that come with mimicking technique. I have 7 written here. Let's see how many I get through. So the first problem with mimicking technique is that technique is not always a one size fits all. So when it comes to using your voice in the best way that actually puts you in a position to sound your best, there are different parts of singing that are universal. So when it comes to like breathing generally is something that's universal for everyone's body. However, when it comes to shaping the sound that comes out of you, that is not necessarily a universal thing. There are certain sounds that are natural and healthy, even for certain singers, that are more famous, that we would want to draw technique from. There are certain sounds that are natural and healthy for certain people that are actually unnatural and not beneficial for another voice type. I'll give you an example. A soprano belt, like a nice, thick, brassy, sharp belt. Sharp as in cutting factor. Belt, like something like a Jennifer Hudson or like a Beyonce belt that just rings for God knows how long. You could take that as a male and use your falsetto to actually sing in the same range and create a similar sounding effect or whatever with your voice. But that shrill sound that you might hear in a soprano voice can be mimicked by a male, but the creating more brightness and more power to try and match that sound won't necessarily put the male voice in its most optimal position or a place where that voice is optimized. And I'm not saying that, every single time a male won't be able to create something that a female can do. I'm saying that it's not one size fits all, right? Everyone's technique, an understanding of good technique comes with an understanding of one's own voice and one's own body. And not every body and not every voice is going to be able to create that sound, especially in the male falsetto realm where, you're using lighter sounds that are not connected to the rest of your voice. Now head voice is a little bit of a different thing, but we're not trying to get into all of the super details. But if you're creating a sound that is disconnected from your range, but it has a little bit of that shrillness or that power, you're not necessarily putting your voice in the most optimal space. And a lot of these sopranos can go even higher and be completely comfortable. And for a lot of men, they actually might be stretching their voice in a way that isn't quite natural for them, or even isn't a part of where they sound their best. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of us have a lot of, and this is getting into one of my points, a lot of us have, role models. A lot of us have, I guess, vocal mentors that we look up to, that we love. And a lot of the time we'll try to take what they do and apply it to our voice, when in reality, there's two different voices. Now, I'm not saying don't learn their songs. I'm like, listening to music is amazing for actually learning tunes and learning how to sing. But that will only take you so far. Right? There's a certain point where you need to have someone that will guide you, a coach that will guide you to the truest sound for your voice, and a sound that actually works for your voice and not everyone else's. Right? So technique is not one size fits all. My second point, or the second problem that comes with mimicking technique, is that perception, and it's kind of connected to the first, but perception is not enough when it comes to duplication. I'll say it again. Perception is not enough when it comes to duplication. So when it comes to actually creating a sound, recreating a sound that you're hearing, a lot of the time, especially with an untrained ear, what we're doing is we're creating a perception of what we think that person is doing. When in reality, when we recreate the sound, there's actually an entire process that would be that's involved that we're not necessarily informed with, if we're not a coach, or if we didn't study voice. There's a lot of things in that gap from perception to duplication that we might be missing. And because we're you may not necessarily have that lack of knowledge actually works against you in creating the sound that you want to. And so a lot of people can hurt themselves in recreating sounds that they hear on the radio, because perception is not enough. Again, you need an extra ear. You need an extra an expert that will actually be able to guide you to safe duplication, right? It's not enough. A perception is not enough. You need someone that could objectively tell you what's going on and objectively guide you to the right place for your voice, right? My third problem with mimicking technique, or stopping at mimicking technique, is that I feel like all of these are very much connected, but you start imagining problems that aren't even there and solve them with and start solving the problems that you have with solutions that aren't real solutions. So I've had so many people that come to me and tell me, you know what, my voice is not powerful enough. I want my voice to sound powerful. And for me, and I guess just kind of bringing you a little bit into my head, when I hear someone say that, first of all, I'm listening to their voice. I'm listening to their speaking voice, and I'm listening to how they, as soon as you have a conversation with me, so for people that book a call with me, the moment that you start talking to me, I'm already starting to make judgments of how you use your voice based on how you speak to me. Right? And so when I'm listening to someone's voice and they're telling me that it's not powerful enough, if they're using, if their voice is a little bit thicker, or they're using their voice in a much more chest dominant way, and they're telling me that their voice isn't powerful enough, that tells me that that what could be happening in their voice is that they are actually muscling through to try and get more power, when that's not the way that you create power. And then for someone who might have a lighter voice, they might be more head voice dominant, that they may not even have an understanding of how to use their chest voice. So that might even be, somewhat legitimate. But the thing is, when you have no idea of what's going on, you can actually create that problem and be like, you know what, my voice isn't powerful enough. You can let's go to the person that has a thicker voice that's talking to me, and it's just like, I want more power. I'm like, you're actually probably, and once I start taking them through, I start realizing that that's usually the issue. You're actually already using your voice in a powerful way. You're coming to the end of your voice's rope, so to speak, and you're actually pushing yourself beyond where you can actually go. And that person doesn't realize that, And because they're listening to someone that they feel has a more powerful voice, they're, in their whole perception mode, they create a problem that actually isn't there. And what they do is they start trying to, like in that particular situation, that person would try to use even more power to create that power that they want. And they create power with force, right? That solution isn't going to help. In fact, force usually isn't the thing that people need in order to actually get even more powerful all the time. So and again, this is all so sensitive because it's all very specific. And when you mimic technique and you stop there and you never get the actual help from an expert, you actually are pulling yourself into a world of not shoulda, woulda, couldas, but like ifs, ands, or maybes, or like just this entire world of could be's that you actually are mistaking for things that are actually problems. And so for me, I'm like, why not just invest? Don't waste your time, Okay, so that's my third problem. You imagine problems that aren't even there. My fourth problem with mimicking technique is that if all you do is mimic a technique, and we talked a little bit about this before, you actually lose touch with where your voice actually naturally shines. A lot of us, especially, in just wanting to be an unforgettable vocalist, someone that touches the heart of every person that they sing for, we can get very dissatisfied with our own sound. We can think that our voice is this, our voice is that. Even like the example I gave before, my voice isn't powerful enough. My voice doesn't do this or it doesn't do that. When we're so busy looking at what other people do and mimicking what they do, we lose touch with what our voice is actually built to do, right? Every single person's voice has its own little fingerprint. Like it's the reason why you can recognize someone that's calling you from, down the way. It's your cousin Becky or your cousin Beatrice. I don't know why these names are so anyway, but you can tell who's calling you because every single voice has a fingerprint. Every single voice has its own mark. And because every voice is different, and every voice is built differently. And if every voice is built differently, every single voice is going to have its own place where it shines and thus its own approach. So when we're actually looking at everybody else's voice and not really considering our own and what it does, what we do is we lose touch with what makes our voice the best, and we lose touch with the things that we need to do in order for our specific voice to sound at its best, because we're focusing on so many other people, right? So if we stop at mimicking technique, all we're doing is we're just hearing what other people are doing and seeing where our voices, quote unquote, lack, when in reality we're just misinformed and uninformed with what our voice can actually do. Okay, right? And then my fifth problem with mimicking technique, and I think I'm gonna end here because I have a few more, but maybe I'll kind of give that in another bonus episode or something like that. You make, and this is connected to the point before. My fifth problem with mimicking technique is that we make dissatisfaction with our own sound a normal thing, right? In a word, and I think I said this, and I kind of been on this train about a world that actually, we live in a world that is built on comparison. We live in a world that is built on looking at someone else's life, drawing the best things out of their life, and seeing the areas in our lives where we don't measure up to what that person can do. And what we do when we do that is that we are constantly living in a space of scarcity. We're looking at what we don't have, and we're constantly seeing what we don't have. So because we don't see what we do have, we constantly are living in a space where we're dissatisfied. And of course, if you're living in a space where you're dissatisfied, you're not going to want to sing, right? Singing is an act of gratitude. Singing is an act of joy. Singing is an act of just bliss and of just an enjoyment of life. And if you feel like your voice is not enough and your voice is never going to measure up to somebody else's, you're always going to be in a space where your brain is going to be like, nah, let's not sing. Let's actually, and I've had there are some people that are very close to me that I've had conversations with, and and they'll tell me that something's wrong with their voice, and yeah, they'll tell me that something's wrong with their voice. And then when I kind of, work through things with them, I realize that it's something that they've actually created, like in their own brain. What they're doing is actually almost like a visceral trauma response to a level of dissatisfaction with their own life and with their own voice. Your voice is really telling that way because it's connected to you. It's really amazing how it works. But it's actually also very sad because a lot of us have created spaces where we think our voices cannot do, or our voices are not enough, when in reality our voices in reality we have actually created a visceral body response to those thoughts and those feelings. And so our sound reflects the way that we feel about our voices, and our sound only reflects the dissatisfaction that we live in because we're so busy trying to mimic everybody else rather than sing using what we have, using our God-given voice. And if you're in that place, this is all of these reasons are the reasons why you need to book a call with me, so that we can actually talk to you about where you are with your voice and how we can take you from just mimicking somebody else to actually discovering what you can do. So what I want you to do is go to reclaimyourvoice.ca/call and book a voice breakthrough call with me, because what we need to do is see where you are right now vocally, see what's not working, and actually see what it would take to get you to where you want to be, and actually talk about what that would look like. So if you are ready to make that plunge, if you're ready to actually discover what your voice's full potential actually is, I want you to book a call with me at reclaimyourvoice.ca/call. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, I would love for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel where this podcast is, or just simply follow this where you're listening to this podcast, on Spotify, on Amazon, wherever. I really want you to continue to be a part of this conversation because we're reclaiming people's voices, reclaiming my voice. Anyway, I'm O'Neal Gerald Donald, and I will hopefully be talking to you on the next podcast. I'm getting better at this. Anyway, you guys have a wonderful day, night, whenever you're listening to this, okay? And hopefully I'll be speaking to you soon. Okay, bye everyone.